Good morning. Hi, how's it going? You might remember me. I'm Nick from the previous panel. Now I sit in the chair of power. And today we're here to talk about Instagram versus Snap or Snapchat or whatever you want to call it. So let's start off pretty wide. Instagram or Snap? What's the difference? Why is one going to win? What's the happening? What are the kids saying these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably not worth listening to what the kids are saying. I think it's numbers that don't lie. And, if you look at a company like Facebook, who owns Instagram, who has 1.8 billion active users worldwide, it's a powerful tool. So Instagram is riding the coattails of that success. They have direct integration into the platform and the oversight of people that are making very large moves across the media landscape. That said, Snapchat is doing some really exciting work, engaging some really much younger demographics and in a really effective way with a platform that is super highly engaged. As a content creator, as a person that is focused heavily on distribution of content and, branded content solutions and pushing these platforms on figuring out how to make business work, both of them are super viable and super worth resources being put against them. Like I said, the numbers are there. The active user base is there, and they're waiting for brands to engage with them.
Yeah, I think from a content creation standpoint, they're both equally valid. It depends on what your brand message is and what your demographic that you're speaking to, because they both have valid uses. We create a lot of content for a lot of Fortune 500 brands, and it really comes down to what is appropriate and what type of rich media you're pushing out. Sometimes Instagram is the most appropriate because you have a lot of more workflow there. You can put higher fidelity images. You can do a lot better things with video and animation. Whereas if you buy into the ad platform within Snapchat, there are some limitations. Your really beautiful content gets kind of crushed down into 1 megabyte, tech points, and it's not as rich for kind of streamlining those kind of stories that you want to tell. So it really comes down to what is the brand and what does the brand want to speak to and what's appropriate for that brand.
I would say it really depends on where your audience is. If they're more on Instagram stories, be there. If they're more on Snapchat stories, be there. Each platform has its own pros and cons. Like Snapchat has a much better facial recognition, complex filter, fun stuff to do. But then Instagram has way better UI, and it's way better. It's way more intuitive to use it. Also, it's in its infancy. Instagram stories came out in August, so I don't think we can really have a definitive answer for who's going to succeed at this point.
And to kind of go off what you had just said, prior to us kicking off, I think it's very important. The end result of the content might be very similar, in terms of the video being created, but we shouldn't think of them as equal platforms. And I say that because Snapchat is increasingly becoming more and more, at least from a brand perspective, a media channel. It is not a social media channel in the true sense of the word, whereas Instagram, at its core, is still very much that.
Well, it's actually an interesting point that Snapchat is now becoming a media channel. Can you give us a little bit more detail about that and what you see changing specifically and how that's happening?
No, absolutely. And from a brand perspective, and I think it's very important with Snapchat in particular to think about it in terms of the user experience and then what brands are doing. But has anyone run, do you run a brand Snapchat account? Has Snapchat told you, because I've heard this, it's that we don't want you investing in creating content for organic purposes. That's not what this is about for brands. What we want is to be a media delivery platform for you. And I think to the point, there's no verified account. If you type in Ford on your phone right now, how many Ford accounts are going to pop up? How do you know if you're following the right one? Am I really looking for Ford on Snapchat in the first place? There's no way of paying to make sure that Ford pops up and says, check us out, we're on Snapchat now. So it's the fact that they're pushing us towards this as a media platform and actually advising us against it as an organic one, then I think that says it in itself.
It's actually a really interesting point you make about there's non-verified accounts, but if they're becoming a media platform, how do we separate ourselves? Because all our clients, from our perspective, the agency perspective, clients come to us and they're like, well, you presented us this pitch, but there's no Snapchat idea. And you're kind of like, okay, but maybe that's not the best platform for you. So if brands can't get that verification, what do you see doing? And I think we'll start with Josh here because Fox is a major brand. How do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a challenge. I think, algorithms have presented roadblocks for brands, and, there are platforms saying this is not the best use of your time, but I think that the overall, signals that we're seeing are that branded content is the future. People that are marketers that are thinking about, our messages just aren't working with our consumers. People aren't engaging with our content. But if we were to connect with content creators that are actually engaging with audiences and have influence and messages are traveling, then that partnership could be very strong. And I think Snapchat is about authenticity, which, Christy was talking about in the last panel. Authenticity is everything, and being able to be a storyteller and being a brand that has a lifestyle message. There are pieces that you can take from that and connect to other stories that are being told and marry that together, and that content can live on any platform, because if it's cool and you're in your news feed and you see it and you like cool stuff, you're going to click on it.
Very cool. And you bring up a really interesting point about the authenticity. So, Brian, when you decide to make content, how do we understand the audience behavior so we can continue to make that authentic content? You're studying the difference between the glossy and the unpolished. How do we communicate an authentic message?
Kind of going back to what he was talking about, where it's starting to lose its identity if it's becoming a media channel, but that doesn't mean there aren't elements of Snapchat that are still valid, and they can still be kind of raw. You can have some verified accounts. You could do facial recognition. If you have a Taco Bell face, that's Taco Bell. Someone that's a third party is going to come in and make a Taco Bell face and throw Taco Bell branding onto a Snapchat filter and it not be verified. So that is going to be there, but that still has some sort of raw and authenticity to it. So there are times in which Snapchat is appropriate. A lot of it might be more event-based, having those filter overlays or doing a sponsored story. There is something to that content that still makes it authentic, and it still hits the key demographics and probably hits your benchmarks for KPI or CPM, but you're not relying on the fidelity because it does have that kind of rawness to it. It's still kind of authentic, but you're kind of doing to it what's inherent within the platform itself. So you can still build that slightly verified content and to live within Snapchat, and I think that's when it's appropriate, is when you can kind of determine that.
So, Chrissy, it looks like you really want to follow up on that.
Yeah, I'm so excited about what everyone is saying. And I think, one, the brands that are publications or are media outlets, they have the advantage, right? Because that's where they get to tell this long-form content. And a fun statistic, 30% of Snapchat users are following the election and the stories on Snapchat. I'm one of them, and there are great, real, newsy stories on Snapchat, which is awesome. But what do you do if you're not, producing content like that? You brought up filters, which I think is a great idea, and I want to share an example of a brand using that. So does anyone know what SoulCycle is?
Yep.
Okay, so they purchase geo filters, which can be very cheap if it's just a building, and so all the girls and guys, some guys go to SoulCycle, that are going to SoulCycle can take a snap after and have the SoulCycle Summer of Soul filter on that and share it. And that's a different way to get your brand out there on Snapchat without actually doing a story. And a tool, because I know we're big on tools today, is it's an app called Pepper app, and that will pepper like a pepper. They have templates that you can just use, and it's $5 to buy a template. That's not counting the cost of purchasing the geo filter from Snapchat. Or you can go on Canva, another tool. Canvas, without an S, is basically what that is. And you can make your own if you just get the dimensions for the filter, which I don't know off the top of my head.
Interesting. So then, Justin, if Snapchat is asking brands to no longer produce this organic content, do you see that the future being these add-on tools to what the platform is?
No, absolutely. And so I don't want to denigrate Snapchat because I think it is an excellent platform. And I think where it does have Instagram beat out is because Instagram, being a part of Facebook, is this monolith, right? And how long has it taken to see some relatively recent changes to the platform? Like, it has always been the same exact thing. But Snapchat is constantly innovating. They're trying new things, and sometimes they fail, sometimes they succeed. But you had mentioned events, and I love what they're doing with actual snap codes that you can put into an advertisement on a bus stand, or you can put them into just anywhere in an event where you know that your audience is going to be, and you can activate them, and there it goes. You have a piece of content, you have a filter, you have a story that kind of just automatically pops up into your feed once you scan that. That's what Snapchat is doing. They're creating bespoke experiences for brands that you can't get on Instagram. And so there is a thing about authenticity, and I think when we talk about just general engagement and how people use the platform, authenticity is what matters on Snapchat. But on the extreme opposite side of the spectrum is this fact that we can create highly stylized, unique, and crazy engagements on the platform.
Okay, interesting. So then I'll pass it to Josh. As a content provider, how do you see translating these experiences people can get on television, people can get online? How do you see them translating to these types of platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Snapchat, what they've touted is this really young demographic that they have and other platforms don't. And, if you're a company that's looking to buy media, that is looking to come up with a marketing mix of where you're going to spend your dollars, I think Snapchat's probably a good place to look. The problem with it is it's very expensive. In the same way that buying a promoted hashtag on Twitter was kind of cost prohibitive, it is for Fox. Like, I think we did it when we launched FS1, but it was a one-off and not a sustainable one. And also hard to quantify the ROI on that, because you put all this money out there and you want to convert, but you don't always get that. And so, I think as a content creator who's trying to put something out there and, drive any type of engagement, I think it's important, from a visibility standpoint, from just a brand awareness standpoint, to be diverse in where you're positioning yourselves. But some of the big problems that we're having with Snapchat are that they don't really provide analytics, things that we can measure, things that we can truly justify to the executives at the company. Same thing with Instagram. And regardless of the tools, Instagram as a platform and Snapchat as a platform have not opened up their analytics API to truly be able to pull out the insights that you really need to justify the spend. So that's, if high-level metrics are enough to justify a spend for $400,000, then go for it, but that's a lot of money to throw around. And if your demo is young, it might be worth it because there's nobody else that has as powerful of an audience right now.
So then, Christy, how do you justify that spend with your clients?
None of my clients have put money into Snapchat. They have used Snapchat. I mentioned this in the last panel, so first of all, you can, these 10-second clips, you can go out to an event or something that your company or client is doing, and you can make these 10 seconds into 2 or 3 minutes by producing it like a news segment and being thoughtful and creative. So then you save it and you have this video that you can put anywhere, and you can put that video on Facebook and put money behind it, which is exactly what we do for one of our clients. So you don't have to pay for Snapchat, but you can still be on Snapchat. And something else I was thinking about as you guys were talking is it's also great, another free thing, to give an influencer the Snapchat. Let them take it over. Have we all seen brands do this? Yeah, maybe? I don't know. No one's answering. Okay, so like again, SoulCycle does this. I'm going to talk about them again. They'll give a SoulCycle instructor or a studio the Snapchat for the day. And so you get sites like authentic, real, and it's super interesting. So let someone take over your Snapchat.
So there are options to get in the game for free.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely.
Can I just cut in real quick? So, great, yeah, and that's a huge thing, is being able to get influencers involved. The one problem is discovery on Snapchat, and you gotta use multi-platform to point people back to it. So if you have an opportunity where you can get an influencer and make a big splash, you gotta use all of your tools to make sure that people know where that cool content's being created.
Do you mind if I touch upon, I think, what in my mind is the best application of Snapchat to date from a brand level? And this was my old colleagues with the Call of Duty team. And if anyone's familiar with this, Call of Duty went back into one of their previous titles and dropped in an update that had a snap code. Now, they see then the PR team and the social media team seeded out hints that there's something waiting for you if you can find it in this game. So now gamers are going through, they're looking at the game, they're replaying the level, they're talking about it, it's on forums, it's on social media, and lo and behold, they discover this little code. And they take a picture of it. What is it? It's the trailer for the upcoming game. So Snapchat might have been the catalyst, but it wasn't the entirety of the campaign. Does that make sense? It's probably the primary touch point, but it was a PR push. It was social media. And I think if we are going to talk about Snapchat being a part of ROI and what we can prove and proving some of these investments, is going to be how it fits into a larger ecosystem. And ultimately, maybe that'll help us get the money to do the big cool things.
Wow, that was actually perfect, because I was thinking, from my perspective, when we pitch these ideas, it always comes down to being only a piece of the puzzle.
Yep.
So, what do you all think? How do you integrate Snapchat into that larger story? What you just said, for Call of Duty specifically, it's a multi-platform story. It's more about the engagement you can get off the platform than the engagement you can get on the platform. Because like you said, it's just a catalyst to the end. So I put it out to all four of you, how does that look? How do you create that type of content that drives the Snapchat?
Yeah, I really believe that you get what you measure, and I'm, try to make the decisions for the team based on data. And so I think that we decide how we allocate resources across these platforms accordingly, knowing that we have this larger audience on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat kind of goes in that direction. So, I think that being realistic with what we can accomplish and, allocating in that way. And sometimes there's going to be an opportunity where this should be a platform-specific type of program, and maybe it's one that we're working on with Snapchat. We did recently do a deal with them, and we're kind of workshopping on what the next thing is going to be, but they're very hands-on in terms of what they're looking for, and that's a problem for a lot of brands because they just haven't been shown a door, And so I think for us, Snapchat's definitely there. We definitely want to be part of it, and we know and anticipate that it is going to grow over the next several years. And I think along with Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are also going to grow. Maybe not Twitter. They've really flatlined in growth, but there's still a big audience there. They haven't gone away, and they're probably not going to go away. So yeah, it's just a matter of where's your audience? Make that decision, and then go in.
Cool.
Yeah, as a content creator, I actually want both platforms to flourish, because working with a team of designers, videographers, photographers, motion graphic animation, having those platforms just gives us a wider toolkit to tap into. And what's exciting about that is that we don't have to feel like we're limited by a website or, generic or traditional out of home. We can kind of tap into the different elements of those platforms and come up with unique ideas. So say you've got a big box electronic retailer and you've got Black Friday coming up and you've got Cyber Monday coming up. You can piggyback off that with new tangents of ways to tell stories, and you can come up with Easter egg ideas. You can come up with filters. You can come up with discovery stories. There is so much there to our benefit as creators. It really gets us excited about it, and then it's only as good as the stories you're telling and the creative you're telling. And for Knock, what we really love to do is find what the appropriate platform is and then go as far as we can with it, and even make our expressions be somewhat, experimental. Because the people like Call of Duty, where they're taking these chances, really makes the platforms fun and exciting. And so having both of them flourish really as a creative agency is exciting for us. So we don't want either of them to die. We want them both to be equally flourishing or in balance, because that just gives us more room to grow and more room to express ourselves creatively.
Yeah, go ahead.
What's the question?
Oh man, now I forgot. Oh, how do you see Instagram become, Instagram, Snapchat, all these things are smaller pieces into a bigger story. So how do you tell that bigger story, or how do you point people to your platform?
Okay, I got so into the answers that I forgot the question. So how do you integrate them? Well, the degree to which you integrate them should depend on if your audience is even there. Like, if your audience is not on Snapchat, like if you're, a B2B and you're talking to older people in tech, maybe you're not supposed to invest in Snapchat for that client. So some of you shouldn't be doing it at all.
Well, I think one of the better points made was that it's a part of a toolkit in each of these cases. And it's about finding the right tool for the right job. You don't, dig a hole with a hoe, and you don't, go hunting with a BB gun. And you don't use Snapchat if you're trying to get, if a return on investment, because it's not there. I don't think you use Instagram stories if you're trying to reach that younger millennial, because we know that Instagram skews a little bit older. 35% is 24 to 35. On Snapchat, that's 37%. That's 18 to 24. So again, it's the audience, but recognizing that you have this as a tool to reach the right audience, and then figuring out, all right, well, is my overall campaign looking to engage this certain person? How do I do it? This is a part of my tool set.
Okay.
I think you said it right. You got to know what your KPIs are before you start a campaign. Lock that in, know exactly what you want to accomplish, and so that when you come back and you get the return, maybe it's not dollar signs, maybe it's, maybe it's action, maybe it's conversions, but all of those things are important to really, truly process and know before you go in on a project.
You also have to invest in good content. If you're going to create something for either platform, you have to look at the details. You have to make sure that it's polished or not polished, and you have to make sure that you're doing it right. You can't just slap something in and then hope that it meets your KPIs. Really look at your teams and make sure you're building a correct team that's got the capabilities to do the right type of video or is doing the right type of storytelling, because designers and creatives, that's what we're here for. And so we're here to make you and help you reach your KPIs.
Well, what if, and this is, I guess, more of a creative question, but if the creative doesn't live up to that KPI, then how do you switch and how do you change and how do you pivot at that point?
Yeah, it's also on us as creatives to be nimble and to kind of push and pull as we see things are being reacted to. So that just puts a lot more pressure on us, and it should be on us, because we should own up to that, because you've set out the analytics, you've given us the strategy. Now it's on us to actually kind of win the ball game for you.
Awesome. Well, all of my questions are answered because I didn't really come with that many, but I want to open it up to the room because we have a few minutes left here. Because, oh, wow, a lot of hands. Go ahead.
I'm really curious what you guys think in terms of how consistent you have to be with Snapchat or Instagram stories in order to be able to follow and create engagement. Do you have to post several times a day, or You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, I think you need to be consistent. That doesn't mean that you have to do the same type of thing all the time. And like kind of to the point that we were talking about in the last question, being able to pivot, being able to fail and learn from that is important. But the consistency of content going through your channel is really important because, you know, I think the whole point of having fan engagement is that you're going to get people that want to engage with you on a regular basis. That way they can be ambassadors for your brand, you know? That way it's top of mind, and, you know, when they're in conversations and presented with an option to share content, they're going to think about you. So consistency and visibility is important, especially on Snapchat and Instagram, because it's above the fold. It's what you see at the top. And the stories, meaning the stories are the ones that are above the fold. Everything below is, you know, from the discover experience and just normal people's kind of content, it doesn't show up, you know, right away. So I think that is a good way to like surface your content within the experience.
That's really helpful. Can you talk a little bit more about the visibility aspect?
Yeah, so I don't know if you look in Instagram, the way that they've structured it is when, you know, you're doing a story, your content shows up with your logo right at the top. And I think that's, you know, Instagram, basically it was a carbon copy of what Snapchat was doing. That was by design because it was a good user experience. Like, there's no mystery that they ripped it off, but everybody rips everybody off. Like, you know, Fox Sports, we are looking at ESPN, we're looking at Bleacher Report, we're looking at Complex Sports, we're looking at, you know, Vice. All of these guys are doing great work, and, you know, I don't have any, like, you know, belief that like Fox Sports is superior just because we're a rights holder. We've got a lot of work to do in order to capture an audience. So I think information sharing is huge, and collaboration is huge. And yeah, we're competitors, but like it's important to recognize what other people are doing in the world so that you can get better.
Christy, go ahead.
So I love everything you said, and I totally agree that like as much as you can be doing a story, do a story, but don't put out stuff just for the sake of having it out there. Like I can think of an account that puts out almost the same stupid thing every day, and at this point I will not even open that because I know what it's going to be and it's completely unengaging. So like this applies to everything, blog posts, tweets, everything. Unless you have something to say that's valuable, don't say it. So try to be creative and be valuable. Not that you were ever thinking of doing that, just like
Totally. Yeah, I mean, storytelling. Tell a story, don't just say words, and that's important.
And I also like what you said, like we can look at what our competitors doing and see what's succeeding and then do it better.
Wow. It's just sometimes it's really hard to understand why certain brands are really growing in numbers like on social and some aren't. I don't know, sometimes it's hard.
Well, I think some brands are inherently better suited for it. I'm sure probably all of us have had some point where a client said, you know, we need to do something more like Red Bull. and you know, you kind of, well, Red Bull invests millions and millions of dollars into creating content, and to the point where you post when you have something to say, not just to post to keep your metrics up or keep yourself in the feed. And that's the rub. I think your posting frequency to either of these channels, or really any channel, is dependent upon the content that you have to work with. And I think when we talk about telling stories, telling a story isn't just a series of interconnected images that we're pushing out on Snapchat or Instagram stories. It's something that requires planning. It's what do we want to say? What is the narrative? How do we show the narrative? I'm surprised that I don't see more creators doing storyboards ahead of time in the same way that you would do a video shoot. And that's the kind of thing. Elevate the quality before you start worrying about the quantity.
It can take a really long time to make a 10-second video if you want to do it right. And it's shocking. What do you do? Like, what are you thinking about? Tell us.
Well, I run an agency, and we basically make videos for brands and celebrities and nonprofits. But it's like sometimes it's really interesting what engages an audience and what doesn't. Like, I'll put up stuff that's like the most really cool, like rising star, and then I'll put up a picture of my 9-month-old, and everyone's just like that's what interests them. You know what I mean? So
Well, it's
Do you want the
interesting.
secret? Sorry.
Go.
Dogs. Just post about dogs
Well,
and you
puppies.
are fine.
So
Hobbies.
I will say to that point, you know, for a long, long time at Fox, we've got NFL, MLB, soccer, UFC, NASCAR. The list goes on in terms of the sport verticals that we're working on. But I think that they're outside of those verticals. I've really started from a data science standpoint to look at horizontally what are some of the triggers that get people to take action with us, and they're always emotional. And so, you know, what you're saying about, you know, you've got your kid, you know, they're looking at you, people are going to love that, hearts, emojis, like, you know, like you've posted, or your robot has posted. There are different levels of engagement, and if you can get people, you know, to kind of connect with your content in an emotional way, it becomes way stronger of a connection.
And I think there's an interesting case study that YouTube has put out about the hierarchy of content. It's hub, hygiene, and hero content. And Red Bull follows this kind of hierarchy to a T. So their hub content is, hygiene content is content that excites their super fans. So it'll be a very small mountain biking event. The level up, the hub content is more of like the fluke tog, which is kind of like general audience. And then their hero content is when the guy jumped from outer space and landed on the ground, and that's like super, super broad audience. So they kind of put their content out at different pieces to activate people, as Josh just said, with different emotions and different triggers, and that's how they can retain this audience. Go ahead.
So I definitely believe that Instagram and Snapchat both coexist together, and I'm currently using both like as a larger puzzle piece to promote Facebook or YouTube video. Do you guys have any strategies to use both of them at the same time together to promote a campaign, to use them both together?
Yeah, I mean, at Fox, and just kind of what I'm seeing in the space right now, in the content space, is multi-platform. Like, yes, we've got TV. Yes, we've got our MVPD products that are streaming our linear content. Yes, we've got Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. But the user experience is really important too, in the way that people are taking in the content. And so scaling it accordingly takes a little bit more resources, but it's the difference, you know, between 100 and thousands and millions of views, like square video, vertical video, those types of considerations and the content that you're editing, really important, because it's the way that people are receiving your content online.
Does anybody have anything else to add on how to develop that strategy?
I think it all comes down to content planning. I think you could almost do this on a spreadsheet, and that's kind of how I see it as a creative, is working with someone that's doing social media strategy. Is they're laying out all of the channels and the appropriate touch points, and then we build the creative to that. But let's take, for instance, a children's brand. They might have a consistent story on Instagram, but then they might have an event like a Mom 2.0 Summit where it's influencer bloggers. So at that touch point, we're going to have a very similar type of content, but it's going to be on Snapchat as opposed to Instagram. And it really comes down to that planning, and then you can kind of divvy up your content in the creation portion of it between those platforms. And that's what really helps some of these bigger brands.
Does anybody else have any additional questions? In the back.
I started using Facebook Live, and I know Pac-12 is using it a lot, and it's getting a lot of attention because the fans at least get on, they start interacting with the people that are, it's like Periscope and everything else. But I was wondering how that fits in, because I know it's a demographic of, probably my age, baby boomers more. But how does that fit in with all this? Because I don't go to Instagram to look at it. I go on Snapchat, personal, but I do Facebook for sports and stuff.
Christy, do you want to take this one? It looks like you're about to jump out of the chair.
Facebook Live is so great. So, like a pro tip, you have to be live for 10 minutes to get like more engagement. Like, and Facebook has even like stated that. And if you want to see an example of someone doing Facebook Live, right, go to Josh Oakes's. Hi, Josh. Go to his like Facebook, because he goes live all the time, and it's a really good example.
So it's 10 minutes.
Yeah, like shoot for.
Facebook's actually going out there to look for people. It says we're looking for people. Whereas I think on Twitter when you're live, it's going to your followers and if they share it. But is it true that Facebook's actually going out there and trying to find people interested other than your likes and favorites?
Big time, yeah. I mean, we have a deal with them. We went live during the World Series, all through the postseason, but especially during the World Series, we had alternate cameras going, live feeds in the last inning of the game. We did a pregame show that was live. That's a lot of the content that we're programming now. We stopped kind of doing VOD stuff. It's live now. We've got the Facebook video API. We've got the Twitter video API, which is powered through Periscope. But we're able to simulcast on both of them. We're able to bring graphics in and create actual television. There's a bunch of different tools that you can sign up for that will help kind of push that video if you want to integrate graphics. Telescope, there's a bunch of others. And you know, you can basically create television now through those platforms. And then from a branded content standpoint, it's the same thing that we're doing on TV, where we'll sell, you know, a segment of television brought to you by Ford or whatever it is. I'm actively putting packages together to go out to brands to try and sell franchises for pre-game types of segments, you know, original content, all that kind of stuff. And I would say, like, if you're representing a brand, consider that type of branded content play, because that's how we are thinking about, like, that's how Fox is thinking about making money from a digital standpoint now.
Some other things to think about when you're live are, you have to be interesting. So just because it's going to be live doesn't mean it should just be off the cuff. Like, you can definitely plan what you're going to talk about, what things you want to plug in there, who you're going to interact with, how it's going to go. It's way easier, like, if you're at an event to do something like that. So one time I went live and I was like kayaking in the LA River. So what am I going to talk about for more than 10 minutes about kayaking, right? So like before I went live, I Googled facts about the LA River so I would have things to say. It's like a news broadcast. So just make it interesting, because I've definitely seen brands be like, oh, we're here, we don't have anything to say, awkward pause. And then you leave because it's not interesting. So, yeah.
Yeah, concerts seem to be really,
Yeah, that would be fun.
concerts and I'm at a high school football game, so I didn't know that was so big, but when you're at a high school football game with a recruit from somebody's college, they're like all over it. So you get all these pop.
The other thing, just so you guys know, Facebook is going all in with live video. They're about to put a button in their nav. They already have, but it hasn't rolled out wide yet. Yeah, the play button. So that basically aggregates all the people that are going live across the world, and you can just plug right in. And also, if you've noticed that from your phone you can't upload video anymore, you can only go live. So they're really pushing that forward.
I will say though, and when we talk about live video, and let's use sports as a perfect example. I love the fact that I can tune right in and hear my beat writers tell me about my favorite team. I love that they can get on the field and go chasing after the player as he celebrates. That is a very different experience than anything you will find on Snapchat and Instagram. But if you look at it, for me, my favorite thing on Snapchat, College Game Day. Because what that is an aggregation of all kinds of different activities and different ways people are experiencing the exact same moment, all of which I love because I'm a fan. I'm a college football maniac. But arguably, I think that's my favorite part. That's my favorite piece of social content every Saturday.
Yeah, and it's a highly coordinated effort, like with ESPN, and they're doing a great job, but that's Snapchat's way of saying, hey, we want to invest in sports. We want the young people of America to get their sports here. So yeah, it's awesome.
But you could do that with anything almost.
You could.
But just recognizing that two very different experiences, and this is just my preference, but really they're all good. But what is it you want to ultimately create? And I think you probably have to choose between one or the other, just depending on your bandwidth and what you're able to afford creating.
Another layer for all of this is, let's say you're going on YouTube Live, and then it's going to be a video on YouTube thereafter, or any YouTube video, even if it wasn't live, and you're just going to put it up. And I don't hear people talk about this a lot, so I want to share it. There's a transcript. You can search engine optimize that transcript. And I'm not talking about in your description. If you're making a video, you should be thinking about keywords, and you can even say, hey, I'm going to interview you. Let's make sure to use Digital Growth Summit in this conversation. Don't say it, don't say that. Think of the word, think of the terms in a non-spammy way, like be useful, because you want that content bound. So you can just be thinking about that too. And if you want to learn more about SEO, I'm giving an SEO breakout session over there at 1 or 1:30. Done. Okay.
Another shameless promotion, and I think on that, does anybody else have any questions at this point? I think that about wraps us up. Thank you, panelists, so much. I feel a lot smarter than I did an hour ago.